Welcome everyone to the Red Rocks Victim Rights Week program. We're so excited to be a part of the 40th anniversary of the National Crime Victims' Rights Week. The goal of the National Crime Victims' Rights Week is to inspire our community and raise awareness of victims' rights, which fits great with this year's theme for the week, which is support victims, build trust, and engage communities. It's our job to support and help those who have been victims in any way we can. We've put together a wonderful program today with some great ideas on how you can help. To start off this event, we'd like to share with you the Victims' Rights Week theme video for this year.
National Domestic Violence Hotline. Are you in a safe place to talk?
We're such a critical resource. We know from what we hear from the people who use our services that the hotline itself is a lifesaver.
Building trust is incredibly important when working with children and young people impacted by the opioid crisis. There are a number of very complex needs related to this issue.
So you use a toy when you feel angry?
Yeah.
How do we as a multidisciplinary group of stakeholders in a community work to address those needs?
We're open 24/7. Have you called the shelter in Detroit already?
The hotline could not exist without the local shelter, without the counseling services, the legal advocacy.
So how can I assist you?
Together is how we create a journey that is a life that is free of violence for survivors.
Crime victim compensation can really be a game changer in someone's life.
I felt validated. I remember finding out that I got approved for it and just crying and telling my family that finally somebody's believed me.
The ability to access a trusted advocate in the community is huge.
The purpose of crime victim rights is to ensure that crime victims are heard and have input in their criminal process against their offenders. In addition to input and notice, crime victims have the right to compensation for direct financial losses that occur as a result of a crime. These following slides contain materials designed to inspire your community and raise awareness of victims' rights and promote this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week theme. Support victims, build trust, engage communities.
Right to privacy.
Right to restitution.
Right to protection. Right to be heard.
Right to notice, be informed.
Right to be present.
Right to be treated with fairness.
Right to apply for victim compensation.
Right to information and referrals.
Right to return of personal property.
Right to speedy trial.
Right to standing and remedies.
All right, we would like to turn the time over to a few guest speakers that have been willing to come and share their story with us. I'll turn the time over to John to introduce the first one.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Rich, and today I'm here to introduce Julie Rudnick, a mother whose son was involved in a homicide incident.
Hi, my name is Julie Rudnick. On October 7th, 2018, my daughter and I were sleeping. It was a Sunday night. It was the first night that we had any kind of weather in the fall for October. Went to bed early that night. We both get up early. We were woken up by 7 to 8 gunshots, pretty rapidly fired right outside, maybe 20 feet away from my bedroom window. My daughter Courtney had just moved into a little tiny home RV that she had created for herself in the driveway. So she was outside about 20 feet the other direction. We were both in a dead sleep, just frantically, trying to wake up and orientate ourselves to what we were hearing. Were they, fireworks? Were they gunshots? Just not even really being able to decipher quickly, just knowing that my first intuition was to run outside. My daughter was already running outside from the other direction. A neighbor had texted her and said that she believed that her brother, my son Anthony, was in the street. So we ran to him. Courtney got to him, just a little bit before me. She's just, screaming and screaming Anthony's name over and over again. We live on a street not far from Red Rocks College that is very dark without streetlights, and it took a while for Courtney to even get to Anthony, and she turned him over and confirmed that it was him, and then she just started wailing and screaming, and I personally had never heard that much pain. I was, like I said, a few feet behind her. I came up to him. Luckily, I was on the side of him that she could not see. He had a gunshot straight between his forehead. He was alive. He was fighting for his life. He was, his head was, it was, not to be too graphic, but completely blown out through the back. I had literally just taken a course and stopped the bleed and was certified to know how to do that. And knowing that where the wound is and how much blood there was, I just went into action knowing that you can't put a tourniquet on somebody's head. He was convulsing. It looked like he was trying to get up. I don't know if he was actually trying to get up or if that was just his nervous system. At that moment, there was people all around. I just remember everything was just in a blur, just screaming and screaming, trying to get West Metro Fire and the Lakewood Police there quick enough. And I'm sure you've heard other stories where it just seems like it took forever for them to get there. We're trying to help him. There's no way that we can help him. We're trying. We're just in shock. The ambulance and the police did come. They took him away very, very quickly. Within seconds, however, I truly believe they kind of forgot about Courtney and I. At that moment, our driveway was blocked. Many police officers with dogs and long guns and lights, and we couldn't even get out of our driveway because, of course, they're now coming to try to find who shot him. All I knew is I wanted to get to St. Anthony's Hospital as soon as I could. Literally had to find a police officer to give us a ride there. Just remembering how slow motion everything was, trying to get, I only live about 6 blocks from St. Anthony's. It was just a very, very long journey there. When we got there, of course, there was police detectives, homicide detectives everywhere already. They had us in the waiting room. The reverend, or whatever you call the people that are chaplain that are in the hospital, was already there, which, I know what that means, but my daughter didn't know, luckily, at that point. They're trying to talk to us, and there's just no way I can explain to you that what we just witnessed, and then being in the hospital, I just want to know where my son is and how he is, and trying to be calm and trying to answer their questions. And it was just absolutely traumatizing. At some point, the trauma team came out and told us that Anthony was still alive, but that his injuries were not survivable. And those were their exact words. At that moment, I don't know what to say at that moment. I just wanted to see my son. And so they had him on life support. Going into the criminal justice system, you may know more than I do, but they were literally trying to keep his body, get his body to a certain temperature, so that they could show brain activity, etc., whatever. I got in there and he just like his head was wrapped, he had brown bags on his hands. That's what I really remember. And we weren't allowed to touch him. And I just, going through this process of not even understanding what was happening, but they had to cover his hands to preserve any evidence, and we couldn't touch him to preserve any evidence. So this is my baby. He's the youngest of 3 children. I have my daughter with me, and Anthony's dad, who hadn't seen him in maybe 11 years, and we can't even touch him. They were, doing all of these things, running around, racing around. And, at one point I asked them to call back the surgeons or whoever they were and asked why we were doing this. And, they tried to explain to me how they have to get his body. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so we made a decision right then and there. I had already seen his injury. I saw it without the bandage. I know what we were dealing with. And we just, we had to have the police in there with us so that we would not touch him. The worst part about it for me was the inability to hold my child as he died. But I am grateful. I am so incredibly grateful to have been there with him. A lot of parents of children who are murdered do not get that opportunity. They don't even know their child is murdered until after the fact. And so that's kind of the beginning of the story. To jump forward, now this is officially a homicide case and we can't go home. Our house is now a crime scene and we are not allowed to go there. So now we've lost my son. I have 230-pound dogs. I somehow have to get out of that house and we got to go to a motel. And I don't even understand all of what's happening. They had the whole entire neighborhood shut down. The whole street became a crime scene. And we were in that hotel until I honestly can't tell you how many hours we were there. It seems like it was the next afternoon, possibly, before they would let us go home. It might have been longer. It's just amazing how your brain protects you from all of these details. So, then the only place that I wanted to be was home and we couldn't go home. So that began kind of our legacy of just of absolute trauma and PTSD. Then when we finally get home, we have to deal with the coroner. We have to deal with now the police want to interview us. As you all know, of course they have to look at us and what we know. I'm not sure if they actually really looked at us as suspects, but they had to interview us. So we had to go down to the police station separately and be interviewed. After we were interviewed, honestly, Jefferson County Coroner's Office was able to release his body fairly quickly. We had a friend who is a mortician who cremated him, and by Thursday, we were on a plane to Huntington Beach, California with his ashes. I didn't want to be here. My daughter didn't want to be here. We didn't feel safe. They had not caught the people. there's this absolute chaos in my whole entire neighborhood. We know that there are 2 shooters by video coverage of having 2 hooded people running away from my home. There was 7 or 8 shots, 2 different kinds of bullets. So definitely 2 shooters. I just couldn't wait to get on that plane and go to California, which is where Anthony loved. We got up to Huntington Beach. My coworkers had raised money to have a family-owned business out there take us out on their boat to the ocean, and we released my son. All of that was in a matter of days. That was 192 days ago, and we still did not have an arrest in Anthony's case. Since then, I have just become a huge advocate for my son. Kind of the only thing that I feel like I've been able to do to help the police is to hang Crime Stopper flyers. And at this point, we've hung over 10,000 of Anthony's Crime Stopper flyers in the Denver metro area. And we do so, we put up about 250 every month. This has created a intense relationship with the Lakewood Police Department. Trust them and negotiate with them. We're at 2.5 years. October will be 3 years.
How long has this affected you, and how does it affect you to this day?
So I think that that's, just a really great question. I'm glad that you asked it. It's affected me for 928 days today. How it affects me is that our case is very, very different than most homicide cases. The fact that it happened at my home, the fact that we witnessed the injury, the fact that the people are not caught. How it affects us is that puts us in a whole different level of trauma. So, I can't afford to move. I don't want to move. So every car that goes by, everything that shows up on our video camera, every sound that we hear, my daughter especially, Anthony was her best friend. She is just traumatized. We had a car show up on our security camera. How it affects us is the car was out there for several minutes. Immediately, there is no other options that come to our mind. These people are here, they're coming back. Even though logically that may not make sense, that is our experience, because there's, we don't know who they are. We don't know what the motive is. We don't know if they're in our neighborhood. So it affects us by really hard trauma responses. I am in much deeper therapy than my daughter is, with a specialist that works with first responders actually, and trying to overcome those fears. So it affects every single part of our lives, and until these people are caught, it will.
Is there something you believe could have been done differently by law enforcement or the community?
So I think, this is a tricky question for me. And the reason why I say that is because knowing that you all are interested in this career, it would be my great honor if in some way I could teach you some things from a victim's mother's perspective that might have been helpful. Somebody should have gotten my daughter and I to the hospital right away. I understand the chaos, but that would have been the first thing. Make sure that your survivor, your family are taken care of. The most important thing I will say, most important, is just hear, please hear the families. That is the thing that has helped me the most. I mean, Lakewood has a 90% success rate in solving homicides, and so we're in the 10%. So I've had to learn to create a relationship with the homicide detectives and yet not scare them away too, you know? Like, it's a tricky battle. They're not used to dealing with parents. They're used to having us deal with victims advocates. I just have, so I think the things that they have done right is they have grown to trust me. I have grown to trust them. They are an amazing group of people, and I'm incredibly grateful that I have them. Do I get frustrated with them? Absolutely. But ultimately, I know what we're dealing with.
What resources were provided to you following this event? Who were they provided by, and did they help?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with all homicides or crimes like that, I have a victims advocate from Lakewood. She was instrumental in helping us put together and get in touch with the crime victims compensation people in Jefferson County to help us get everything we needed. We had to act very quickly because I couldn't afford a hotel that night. So she helped us to get that paid for. They paid for Anthony's cremation. 4 weeks to the night that Anthony was murdered, another girl named Simone Duran was murdered in Golden. Sunday night, same as Anthony's, and Anthony and her knew each other. So there was a very long amount of time that they thought these cases were connected. So because of that, they also provided security cameras all the way around my house, and so that I can see what's going on. And the most important thing is that the ongoing counseling sessions that I've had have been amazing. I mean, yeah. So that's the resources that were provided, and all of them are, you know, equally as helpful.
Following this event, what organizations have you worked with and or become a part of?
Yeah, so about 4 weeks after Anthony died, a friend of mine that I went to high school with told me about another family who had lost their daughter, and said that I should connect with them. I did, and I joined the Parents of Murdered Children support group in the Front Range chapter, and I mean, I had just never met anyone who had gone through what my daughter and I had gone through, and it was, you know, so incredibly isolating. So I started going there once a month, and that's been 2 years, almost 2.5 years that I've been going there. I am now on the board of directors for them. I do, you know, anything and everything I can to stay active so that I can have an outlet, take an action step to process this ongoing unsolved crime. So I'm very active with them. I'm very proud of the work that we do there. You know, and so I've done just a tremendous amount of volunteer work with them, created the new pamphlets that all of the sheriff's offices and DA's offices are using now to get, and Denver Health Medical, just to get a pamphlet to a family to say, here's someplace you can go. Asking those questions, or asking the victims advocates, or asking the, you know, the DA, depending on where you're at in your trial and your, et cetera. What I've learned is that I have a right to be upset, and but I get way farther with law enforcement if I get upset prior to calling them. That I call my, you know, my best friends, I talk to my family, I get it out, talk to my therapist, have an outline of what I want to say, what questions I want to ask, and then come to them with a really, you know, distinct outline of, you know, bullet points of what I want to ask, and to have patience, because once you're, you know, a victim, It is a long, long process. I mean, my case, we don't even have an arrest. When there is an arrest for first degree murder, well, for murder, homicide, it could be a 2-year process in the courts. So find a way to be patient and find a way to get your support outside of law enforcement and keep your feelings to a minimum when you're talking with them, and you'll get a lot further.
Well, thank you so much again, Julie, for coming and speaking to all of us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Julie, for sharing your story with us. I'd now like to turn the time over to Ice to introduce our next speaker.
So my name is Isley Maresca, and I'd like to introduce Kashmir, who is here today to share her story with us.
I guess I'll be very vulnerable. I'll start with I am Kashmir Jumper. I am the lead peer at Transformation of the Rockies, and I'll be very vulnerable here. I'll tell a story. About 2 years ago, June 11th, 2019, I was in a pretty toxic relationship, situationship, so to say, and was assaulted by the person I was dating at that time and beat up pretty bad, stabbed. Some pretty brutal things happened that particular day. And I was really hesitant because of past experiences with law enforcement to call, but I did. I reached out, and when they got here, it was more detrimental than helpful. So to say, they didn't arrest him. They said it was mutual combat. They identified me as a male, even though that's not how I identify or who I am. Kept using male pronouns, even on the paperwork, all male pronouns. When everything was said and done and they gave us court dates, they didn't make the individual leave, which made me feel really, really unsafe because all of this stuff had just transpired. So I ended up leaving. And I tried to reach out to Victims Advocate with no response. I did my very, very best to try to get a restraining order, but due to the police officers involved, their police report kind of made it seem like I was fighting with this individual and it was two men just bare knuckle brawling when that's not the situation, but that's how they wrote it in their report. So that's kind of how I had to deal with it. And when I brought it to the courts, they were like, well, this kind of states that it was a mutual thing. And yeah, so it was really just hurtful to me. I wasn't able to really get anything. I currently still live in the same place. Luckily, that individual is in jail, serving some long time, so we don't have to worry about him. But in that instance, I felt alone. I felt disrespected for the most part because no matter how many times I said she, they kept saying he. I felt like people were working against me for the simple fact of the paperwork, the police report in question would reflect that two men got into an altercation, that it was something mutual and no one was truly hurt in the situation. Although I am a woman, a trans woman at that, and I was really broke down about that and pretty beat up physically, and you could visibly see this, but they still did nothing of it, which made me feel like they were like, it's okay, she's trans, she's less than a human being, so go ahead and do what you do. We're not gonna arrest you, you did us a favor. That's kind of how I felt and perceived it. With that being said, Victims Advocates, I reached out to 2 or 3 different individual facilities and I never heard anything back from them. I was given a card by one of the paramedics to reach out to an advocacy that deals with trans individuals and haven't heard anything, never heard anything. And that might be due to him not being arrested at that point right then and there. But in my own experience dealing with victims advocates, usually you can call in. Someone can call in and start those services as long as they can provide the police report and show that they were the victim of a crime. But in my case, it was never something available to me, which kind of really sucks.
I had a question regarding like kind of speaking about pronouns. You said that you felt disrespected because they kept using he instead of she. So I feel like that's very common in first responders, like they don't respect that. So how do you think they could be better trained to like use the correct pronouns and have better respect?
Honestly, when it comes to training, I think that is something that definitely could possibly work, but it all starts with each individual person and how they choose to deal with other individuals in this world, whether they respect how they identify or disagree with how they identify. It's really more so a respect factor. Like you wouldn't walk up and call someone out their name, like call them a derogatory name, like a cuss word or something. You would call them by their name or whatever they want to be, called. So it's just a respect factor when it comes to that. So more so than anything, it just takes people to be respectful and understand that you have to call people what they want to be called. It's just the right thing to do.
And how did this event, like what were the traumas that were inflicted after this experience, and how does this affect your daily life?
Honestly, I was very distrustful with the police, and I still am to a certain degree because when calling them, I don't know if they're going to service me or they're going to make the situation worse and make me feel like I'm the problem, even when I'm not. I'm the victim in the crime. How it's affected me on a daily basis is I personally don't. If I have an issue, I try to take care of it on my own. First is calling the police because 9 times out of 10 in my own personal experience, it resulted in me either being beat up, jailed, or just misgendered and disrespected beyond repair to where I just don't even want to deal with it anymore. A part of the trauma, for the most part, is really just being a little fearful. It's a fear factor in it when it comes to reaching out for that type of help because I feel like I'm already a victim of one crime and I could be a victim of another, calling the people that are supposed to be here to save me.
What do you think could be done to better collect data on crimes against trans in Colorado?
Well, actively, I know that a lot of organizations are connecting their systems and stuff like that. So that would be absolutely awesome. And then also it takes our first responders to really know how to deal with trans and non-binary individuals and how to document it correctly instead of just putting their birth gender or whatever they're assumed to be on paperwork. We just need everyone to really document stuff that way, get correct genders and stuff like that. And also, connect with other organizations that keep this type of data. And I would say yearly, we should probably do a survey just to see who has dealt with what, like find a way to mass put that out to trans and non-binary individuals and see what's going on around the United States. Just the idea.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. We definitely, hopefully, in the next couple of years or in the future, first responders can actually assist people in the correct way and, as you said, not assume, not use their birth gender or whatever, and actually like treat people like humans and respect.
Yeah. I'm like, it's not even an option on any form. Like even when filling out a police report, that's not an option. So choose trans woman, trans man, non-binary, other. It's just male and female. It's very binary. So we have to break that because the world is not a binary place.
So could you tell us a little bit about your organization and what you guys provide and the services you provide? And
of course. So I work at the Transgender Center of the Rockies, which is an entity of Mile High Behavioral Health. At Transgender Center of the Rockies, we provide individual therapy, group therapy, gender affirming therapy, peer services, which I oversee. We definitely provide resources as far as doctor referrals, getting people connected with the right physicians, OBGYNs, endocrinologists. We also help with housing as far as getting you connected with our housing manager and finding places. We're actively working to try to start a treatment facility for trans and non-binary individuals in-house treatment. And we also, we provide WPATH letters. It's a resource center, so you can always come just hang out and meet other like-minded individuals. We are back in person fully for groups. All of our groups can be found on our Transgender Center of the Rockies website in our calendar section. There's 6 to 7 groups that run weekly from about 5:30 p.m. to about 8. Pretty much every day there's some type of group, from gender dysphoria to trans mass, so forth and so on. But we just provide services around mental health and transitioning.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
For doing what you're doing and looking to go into these careers and learn all this beautiful knowledge. So y'all have a great day, and thank you again for doing what you do.
Thank you, Kashmir and Julie, for sharing your stories with us. We greatly value the time you've taken out of your day to be here with us. It takes bravery and courage to share your stories, and we appreciate your willingness to be open and share with our class and audience. We now want to share with you some information about intervention and nonprofit organizations located here in Colorado. I'll now turn the time over to Carrie to share a little more about that.
Hi, my name is Carrie, and I just recently connected with Randy. He is the Director of Victim Services, as well as the Survivor Empathy Panel Administrator. And I connected with him to learn about some of the services that they provide at Intervention. And they provide protection orders, safety plans, as well as referrals. They also provide notice to victims regarding an offender, such as if their probation is being terminated, if they were to be rearrested or sent back to court. This notice is done through what they call a critical stage event notification. They also have a survivor empathy panel. This is a one-time class for offenders to take where victims will share their stories to build empathy within the offenders. Intervention is the only agency in the state that provides this empathy group for both domestic and sexual offenders, and they are also the only agency in the country to provide this class for sexual offenders. Below is a link to their website, as well as a phone number that you can call if you are a victim or you know a victim that would like to share their story on the empathy panel. Here at Intervention, they provide a victim assistance emergency fund. This is a one-time payment to victims who may need help with things such as a cell phone bill, a light bill, groceries, things that are not covered under the crime victim compensation. This is a one-time payment, and they must show proof of a utility bill or things like that, and they also cannot have the offender currently living with the victim. Randy and his team at Intervention teamed up with CU Denver Media's department to create a PSA for the rise in domestic violence during COVID-19. Intervention received a micro grant to create this PSA. This video is now available in Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, and the Ute language. These are real survivors, and they are also speakers on the empathy panel.
He keeps telling our children that I have COVID and won't let them visit like the court orders say.
After he got arrested for abusing me in front of our children, he changed all the usernames and passwords on our bank account. Now I can't buy groceries or pay the rent.
She keeps calling my boss, saying I tested positive for COVID.
After COVID, he told our boys that if they come over, they'll get sick and die. He keeps telling them I'm sick.
Domestic violence can happen anytime to anyone, whether there is a pandemic or not. Sometimes it gets worse, even deadly. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, get help.
Thank you, Carrie, for sharing that information. I'd now like to turn the time over to Andy to share a few more helpful resources.
Hello, my name is Andy. Here are some resources I have gathered that I would love to share with you. We felt that it was important to provide resources during this Victims' Rights Week. Some of the resources we have are domestic violence resources, sexual assault survivors resources, victim compensation, hate crimes, legal resources, and some outside resources. If you'd like to download the file, we have that available, which has a little bit more information.
The faces of crime victims are those of our family, friends, neighbors, and community members. According to the most recent National Crime Victimization Survey from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1.2 million people were victims of violent crimes in 2019. We observe National Crime Victims' Rights Week by promoting victims' rights and honoring crime victims and those who advocate on their behalf. We take the next few moments to remember the victims who tragically died at the Boulder King Soopers shooting and all other victims of crime. I want to thank everyone who has joined to learn more about victims' rights, along with our guest speakers, Julie and Kashmir. We appreciate you being willing to come and share your stories with us. We would also like to thank all of the organizations that offer resources to victims, some of which include the Transgender Center of the Rockies, the Lakewood Police Department, Victim Advocacy, Intervention Incorporated, Parents of Murdered Children, and many more. Thank you for all you do for victims of crime. Have a great day and stay safe.